So I loved this thrill of like going out and putting myself out there and enjoying this process of learning. If you mess up, you have to accept it. And I accept every single mistake I make because I know it's like, you know what, next time I cannot wait to try that because I won't do that again. And if I do, it's fine. You're human.
Sports, and more sports. Today's episode is a straight-up masterclass on how being a professional musician is completely parallel to being a professional athlete. Hey everybody, this is Chris from HonestyPill.com. You're listening to episode 25 of the Honesty Pill podcast. This season on the show, I'll be talking to people who are breaking the status quo, ditching outdated traditions, and building a better future for themselves and the people they work with. I'll be connecting you with musicians, sound healers, coaches, hip-hop artists, actors, percussionists, and people who not only inspire and educate every single day, but who are experts at talking about what they do so you can get inspired in your own work. My guest today is the principal percussionist of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, one of the most friendly musicians you could ever work with, my friend and colleague, Matt Howard. Think your tenure process was tough? Make sure you listen all the way to the end for an unbelievable story about the types of hoops LA film musicians jump through to make our boss, Gustavo Dudamel, happy. Worried that you got a late start in classical music? Wait until you hear the surprising success timeline for someone who later became one of the world's premier orchestral players. He wasn't at all competitive. He had never heard his hometown orchestra until he was a senior in high school. He mostly just played drums in a rock band. He didn't practice. He didn't take lessons. And when he finally decided that what he wanted was to go to college for music, he only applied to one college into which he did not get accepted. Sound like a roadmap to success? You might be surprised. Matt's going to share some amazing advice on how to prepare for an audition, how to effectively use a metronome, and we're even going to find out who he thinks is the greatest drummer of all time. You're even going to get a free percussion rudiments lesson from Matt, totally free, by listening to this podcast. You're welcome. Okay, here it comes. Straight from the stage of the Walt Disney Concert Hall, principal percussion of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Welcome to the podcast, Matt Howard.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Chris.
You got it. So, look, it's great to have you in here. It's obviously great to be back on stage with you and the rest of our orchestra now that we're in the post-pandemic shutdown area and we're trying to make that work. But I'm curious, I'd like to kick this off with, how did you spend your time when we weren't on stage for the past year? What was it? Epic practice sessions? Did you read a lot of books? What was your pandemic baby?
Well, I took that time to focus on a lot of things that I guess I wouldn't normally have time to do. Because, when we're working, I'm busy doing like assignments, set up charts, getting instruments ready. Just practicing whatever's for that week. So I took the time to, do some other things like some jazz vibraphone or some like Brazilian music, going out and taking lessons with people that I normally wouldn't on Zoom, I just decided to do that to keep myself busy and also not to get rusty because it's so easy during the pandemic to just kind of, not do anything and just, watch TV all day. So.
And I think I did plenty of that too. But I think it's...
I think we all did.
I think it's pretty cool that, I don't know about you, but I didn't do a ton of Zoom work with students before the pandemic. That was still kind of an unusual way to connect. And now, this is a COVID silver lining, I guess. Everybody is aware that you can connect this way. So almost everyone I know in LA came from somewhere else. I think people are lured with the promise of being able to work and live in a big city and still hop in the car and reach the beach. But of course, we know that it really takes 3 hours to get to the beach from anywhere. But you were born and raised in LA, right?
I was, yeah.
So did you grow up listening to the Los Angeles Philharmonic? Was that your hometown orchestra?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, funny enough, I actually didn't hear the LA Philharmonic until at the very end of my high school career. I was into rock and jazz at that time, and I really didn't know much about classical music. But you want to know what the first piece I heard you all play was? That changed my life was Bolero.
Well, that would either get you inspired or send you running for the hills. And you just played that a few weeks ago, didn't you?
I did.
Wow, wait, so what year was that when you heard that Bolero?
2008 or 9.
All right, so I've been with the band since 2007, so I was on that concert.
You were there.
Now I feel like an old man. So where'd you go to school?
I went to Hamilton High School, which had a music arts program.
Did you have an amazing teacher in high school? Who'd you study with?
I didn't take lessons. I was all self-taught throughout high school. I just played a lot of drum set. I took a drum set lessons, but during that time they're like, oh, we need someone in the band, so go back there. And I was like, what is this thing? And I kind of knew how to play piano, so I just kind of hit the notes at the right time.
I love it. And look, there's going to be some people listening to this podcast I can see them with their yellow steno pads and notebooks ready to take notes. And you are saying that you barely took lessons in high school. You never even went to an orchestra concert. Like, this is awesome. This is called cracking the mold. I love it. This means you don't have to have any particular path to success. So what about college? Where'd you go after Hamilton High School?
So after Hamilton High School, I ended up injuring my finger during college auditions. So I only took one college audition, and I did not get in because, as you can imagine, I wasn't very competitive. But anyway, I ended up going to a community college out in the Valley, Pierce College, for a year. And during that time is when I actually got super focused. You know how hot it gets in the Valley. So I would bring a marimba out in a parking lot in the Valley when it was like over 100 degrees, and I would practice scales and things like that. And during that time, I was like, I'm just going to blitz all these teachers. So I just reached out to people. I reached out to Joe. I reached out to, all these people that I could think of. And I just wanted to take lessons. And I ended up getting into USC. So I got into USC, and then the following year, after my first year there, Jim and Joe came on board. And then from there, I went over to New England Conservatory in Boston, studied with the BSO guys. Absolutely incredible experience. And then, that was my schooling.
Boston's a great town, right? I went to NEC also.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember if they had done all the renovations.
Nope. No, we're still crammed in the basement in a dark little alley.
Well, that's where you guys thrive, though. Percussionists you always have a cave.
It is. We always have the cave.
So, guys, for those of you paying attention at home, don't go to orchestra concerts. Go to a community college. Practice until you get injured, and also don't be very competitive.
There you go.
Top tips from Matt Howard today. That's all you need to know.
You're welcome.
New World was a thing for you also, right? Somewhere after USC.
So immediately from NEC, I won a position with New World. And that's where I just kind of took off with everything, with all the mental stuff and all the audition stuff. Because before that I was taking auditions, but like New World is when I really was like, okay, this is where we really kind of have to step it up here.
We're going to talk about the mental stuff later, but what do you think was it about New World that ignited you? Was it the being in that community where everybody else was sort of hyper-focused, or was it playing those masterworks with great conductors? What did that for you?
Yeah, I think it was all the above. It's just being a 5-minute bike ride away from a practice room that I knew I was gonna have. I didn't have to share it with anyone. Having my instruments there at great facilities, coaching a ton of great coachings, playing huge rep with Michael Tilson Thomas. All these other guest conductors that are coming in. I mean, it was absolutely an incredible experience. And besides that, I was able to go into like bigger rooms, like the stage, and practice in there. And I don't know, it was just extremely fun. I thought it was extremely fun.
That's an interesting topic too, about learning how to practice in different rooms. I never practiced anywhere except for my parents' basement. And the first time I got to play in their church, the sound was like completely different, and the feedback I got was huge. I think it's a good thing for kids to experiment. Just go and play in a boomy stairwell and then play directly into a pillow and see what the differences are.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I give my colleagues over at Colburn a hard time and say that they can't keep students in their studio because they keep getting in and then winning jobs before they finish the degree program. You kind of had that similar, quote, failure at New World, right? You barely were there when you got out.
Yep, I was only there 1 year, and so I didn't get the full New World experience. So,
Matt, you've obviously scored one of the biggest orchestral jobs in the entire industry. And you did it at what people would consider a pretty early age. How old were you when you won Principal Percussion of the LA Phil?
I was 25 years old.
Okay, so that's incredible. And what was your previous job?
New World.
Yeah, so this was your first time at bat. And had you been on the audition circuit for a while? Had you been advancing for a while? Or what was the lead up to this?
Yeah, I took a bunch of auditions before that. I was making finals at a lot of jobs, Colorado, Cincinnati. I almost made finals for Seattle. There were a few jobs, and I was consistently making semis at least. So, I mean, I thought I was doing pretty well.
Did you advance at your first audition?
I did, but it was the Santa Rosa Symphony. So,
You say that like, but it was the Santa Rosa Symphony. I find, and anybody listening maybe can relate, the smaller the orchestra, sometimes the harder the audition process is, because those smaller orchestras don't have the experience of a committee like we have at LA Phil. They don't know how to put lists together. And I think those auditions I remember one audition I took for Charleston, or maybe it was Charlotte. I can't remember. I did in advance, and as I was checking out, I got a free package of M&Ms. I was like, wow, this is so weird. Thanks for the M&Ms, So I think, small auditions can be really funky. Here's the question that every musician who's taking auditions right now wants to hear from you. How did you do it? Can you unpack maybe some broad strokes into how to prepare for an orchestra audition? And part two of that question, was there like an X factor? Was there something that you did that was a major shift that started to see those results that got you from the semis to the finals and then actually to win that job?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to preface all this by saying I have a huge sports background. So all throughout my younger years, I was playing a ton of sports, a ton of baseball, basketball, racquetball, all these different sports. And I just loved competing. I loved that vibe and being competitive with other people and myself. So I guess when I started relating that more towards this, I enjoyed the process of, competing with myself and auditioning. I ended up liking it, and it didn't become so much of a daunting chore, even though it can be very daunting because you're like, there's a lot going for this. But that being said, I think that one of the main things for me that really helped propel me was focusing a lot on fundamentals and taking a step back a little bit and not worrying so much about these little minute things that only my certain instrument cares about. So like Lieutenant Kijay, for instance, I don't know if you know that excerpt, but there's like these 4-stroke roughs and all these things, and percussionists get so detailed about, these 4-stroke roughs need to be heard and need to be phrased this way. And that's great. They need to be great, but at the same time, the quarter notes and eighth notes need to be very solid. And that's normally what takes a back seat. So kind of understanding what the committee is listening for, like realistically. But besides that, also taking a deeper dive myself into my own instrument and learning all these little nuances that I can do myself, these different sounds, these different colors, these different phrasing ideas, trying to really think outside the box as much as I can and do things against the grain a little bit that other people might not think is the right way, but understanding, there are no rules for this. This is an art form, and there are many different ways to skin the cat. And if I want to try to stick out, I need to try to find different ways to look at this, a fresh new way to look at this. So I tried to do my best to look at it in as many different angles as I could. Doing that while under pressure and all these things was super, super helpful. But yeah, I think taking more pride in my own work and diving into my instrument a little bit more helped boost my confidence immensely. That was huge, because I think before that I was in the camp of like, my teacher told me to do this, so this is what I'm going to do. Instead of just saying, no, I've done that, I've practiced that, I know what it sounds like, I know what happens, this is what I'm going to do, because I know for me, this works the best. Because in the end, teachers can say things, but it's you on the stage taking the audition. So if you don't have the confidence to go in there and do things, there's no chance. You're already shooting yourself in the foot. At that stage, I realized, so this is all about confidence now. So now I have to build my confidence up as high as possible in my own performance and just my concept of these excerpts and these pieces. So I'm kind of a perfectionist in that way. I think a lot of us pretty much are when it comes to this, but just kind of needing to understand, the piece, the era, all these different things, the sound I want to go for, and just dialing it in, all these little minute things so that I was just comfortable and I was able to just play when I got there. But other than that, I would say at the beginning when I was first starting, just drilling fundamentals, like just time, being able to legitimately play with good rhythm and time, not with the crutch of a metronome, but really play good time, good pitch, especially for us on timpani. And I think as I progressed more and more, fundamentals kind of took more of a back seat, and I focused more on the music and the performing aspect as opposed to just working on a ton of fundamentals.
A point that I want to just highlight that you mentioned was asking questions of your own self and getting inside your own playing. You can have the best teacher in the world. You can have the best teacher in the world who happens to be the best fit for the way you learn. They still can't do it for you. You have to, and you should do what they say, and you should also question everything they say, respectfully, of course, but they don't have the answers. Let's talk about something else you just mentioned, which was awareness of what the committee is looking for. What is the committee looking for? Because if you haven't been on a committee or your teacher hasn't been on a committee, how do you know what to prepare for and what the priorities are when you're preparing for an audition?
I discovered in myself that I was assuming the committee was looking very detail oriented. Well, they are, but I jumped into the details way too fast when I was practicing these excerpts or solos for auditions. And I needed to take a step back and start more broad. I need to make sure that the really basic things for every single excerpt were there. At least from being on the one committee with the LA Phil, it was just like the people that just had just overall great sounds, knew how to play in a larger space, knew how to showcase in one round their dynamic range, their different colors that they can bring out, their good rhythm, solid feel of time and rhythm, and where to generally place things I felt was super huge and important. And then kind of working in more detailed stuff after that with more, intricacy performance practices and all these things and little nuanced timings of grace notes or, things like that. But I think just the general basics of sound, time, and rhythm for me. And pitch, sorry. Just very basic things needed to be extremely solid before I really dove into anything more, like phrasing or any of that stuff. Just making sure that everything was very vanilla and good, generally, and consistently. From being on that one panel, it was just anyone in the first round that gave an excuse that made it sound like they were somewhat amateurish generally did not do well. And you can also tell people's confidence levels that they were a little timid, especially for something like a principal chair. I would figure you want someone to have a lot of confidence in their sound, even if it was not, what we wanted. It doesn't matter as long as someone went in there with a very confident sound and told us how they thought it should go, as opposed to trying to play for us and trying to guess what we want. It was more so they're trying to show us how they want this to go, and I'm sold on that.
I want to talk about sound for a minute because I think this is tied into another important skill for audition success, which is self-awareness and nuance. So even if you're hitting a bass drum, and I'm not a percussionist, but I know where you hit it, and obviously the type of mallet you use, et cetera, has a huge impact on sound. Talk about that a little bit. How do you find and how do you communicate to students finding the nuances in sound as a percussionist?
Absolutely. So a lot of sound, besides those general things that you said about just the mallet or where we're hitting the instrument, is a lot for us about touch, because that's the thing that we miss out compared to every other instrument is we don't touch our instrument a majority of the time. We have to use an implement to show our touch. So that's why I relate a lot of things to what we do through like tennis or golf, because it's the same exact thing. You're not touching a ball like baseball and throwing it. You're using an implement and having to implement something to make an action happen. Trying to really enhance things like on timpani, for instance, like whenever you see Joe play, like you can really tell when he's playing something really long and legato and dark versus something really short and bright. And not only can you hear it, but it's very visual, especially with what we do. We do a lot of visual things, and those things, and this is a performing art. So these things will enhance the sound of whatever we are doing, inevitably. A lot of it is just also experimenting. I would throw on random, I'll throw on a Snarky Puppy tune, something that I really enjoy playing with, and I'll just sit there and say, I want to practice doing scales with different articulations on mallets. So then use these mallets, but try to get a different articulation, really trying to experiment with pushing myself to different ends of my sound possibilities. Other than that, for all of those, all beginning percussionists or people that haven't just done this, is just lay out all your mallets and I would write a graph like, okay, these mallets here are super weighty but they're also bright. Are they dark? So if a conductor's ever like, can I hear a darker sound? You have a variety of mallets that you're like, okay, these are definitely darker. And I do that with every instrument, bass drum, all mallet instruments, snare drum, all these different sticks, different tunings of snare drums. You can go really deep, mufflings. Yeah, it goes really hard. So
I just want to point out something you just said about conductors asking for a darker sound. I've been in orchestra for a long time, and I would say 98% of the time, that is not the comment I hear. And you know what I'm going to say. The comment I hear from conductors is, could you use a harder stick? Or could you use a lighter stick? And I always think that's so bizarre, because a conductor would never look at a clarinet player and say, could you use a number 8 reed? Or, could you use trumpet? Can you try a 25 backbore on that? They would never assume that they know enough about my equipment. They ask for a sharper articulation or a warmer sound. And I know what you guys are thinking when you're trying to be respectful. You nod, you shake your head, maybe you reach into the bag and just pick up the same set of sticks again and then do what you need to do. I mean, am I right, or am I making this up?
That's happened on occasion, especially if we're already using the hardest sticks possible and we have muffling on it and it's as dry as possible. There's only so much we can do. So this isn't like a recording studio where we can put a close mic up and, do all these things. So it's like, there's only so much we can do to help you out here. But yes, there are times when they're like, can you use green sticks? And you're like, what are green sticks? I got a lot of green sticks, but
that's what I think it was maybe in Boston where it wasn't Seiji, it was somebody else asked, did you bring all your sticks? And they all laughed like, did I bring all my sticks? Let me back the truck up to the loading dock. Okay, so let's talk about mental game for a minute. I think we can all agree that one of the markers for future success is intellectual curiosity, right? And at the same time, most of us realize that there's no ultimate source. Nobody has all the answers. We talked about a minute ago about the inner work to solve our own problems. Were you the type of kid early on who asked a lot of questions? Was that intellectual curiosity, whether it would be sports or music or being a drummer, was that always part of your personality?
It kind of was. I always, since I was a young kid, I always had very high expectations for myself, and I hated being bad at things. And I went with pretty much everything, maybe except for school grades. But everything else, I hated being bad. And whenever I saw someone else that was really, really good, I would always go up and ask questions. I would try to be vulnerable and ask to play for that person. Or, I always tried to put myself in these vulnerable spots so I can grow. Because that was, in my mind, that's like, it made perfect sense. Like, there's someone that's really good. I want to learn from that person. Yeah. So I think just carrying that throughout my career catapulted me, because then I started, as I went through college, I played little games with people that were like super, that I looked up to. I was like, the Porgy and Bess xylophone solo. I would bring someone in that was extreme, that I would like, made me nervous, like super nervous. And I would say, let's play this for each other and let's see who misses the first note. It's like a little friendly competition. And of course they would win, but it's like, you would keep getting better and better after you would keep getting back up. So I would say that type of mindset really helped catapult me massively.
It reminds me of that quote, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yes.
Like, if you are the best kid in the band, get with somebody who makes you nervous, because that's the only way you're going to push the envelope.
And so I just want to say, I kind of felt, I could be wrong with this, but getting some type of late start, having that in the back of my mind, thinking like, oh, I am so far behind, because as soon as I went to USC, there were people that were playing percussion for so long. They had all these little tips and tricks that I had no idea about. I was so green, but that really helped to actually catapult me more, because I was just like, I'm so far behind. I need to do my best to just catch up to everyone. But in my mind, I guess in reality, what was happening is I was just on light speed compared to everyone else, because everyone was kind of on this slower trajectory while I was trying my best to just practicing countless hours a day working on all these things. So I guess just having that in the back of my mind, like, oh, I got a late start, inevitably kind of gave me some motivation.
I think the lesson there is you did the right kind of work at the moment that you needed to. Mm-hmm. And whether or not you were playing since you were 4 years old or you just started, it doesn't matter, as long as you figure out what that work is. A lot of people who've been playing since they were 4 years old never figured that out. Yeah. And they're the ones who are still working at the shoe store that I used to work at. So I think that's a big boogeyman, though, imposter syndrome. I got a late start. I'm too old. This comes up a lot on this podcast. Let's talk about sports a little bit. So I'm going to talk about the first time I saw you. You were 26 years old when you won this job, principal percussion of the LA Phil, and you just came out of New World, and you're walking around radiating confidence and calm. And I see you walking down the hall of Walt Disney Concert Hall with a book tucked under your arm. And when I realized what that book was, it was no surprise whatsoever. And it was this book right here.
I've never seen that book before.
Yeah. I'm holding up a copy of Golf is Not a Game of Perfect by Dr. Bob Rotella. And I think other people in your section have also read this book, haven't they?
They have.
Talk about Golf is Not a Game of Perfect. I want to hear you talk about something that I have been doing since the minute the light bulb went off in my head about the pre-shot routine. What is that? Why is it so important? And tell us a little bit about how you create pre-shot routines that work.
Absolutely. I just also wanted to give a little background on this. So when I was at New World, again, I said I came from a sports background. So I also am super conscious about my hands. I can't play basketball as much. I love playing basketball, but I can't because if I jam one finger, I'm done. So I wanted to find a sport that I could play regularly, that I could play and not hurt myself. So I decided to try golf because there was a golf course right across the street from the apartments at New World. And so, I was going through all these books online, like instructional books. And then I came across that book, Golf is Not a Game of Perfect, not knowing that it was a mental book at all. Read through the whole thing, and from the first paragraph to the end, I was glued in. And it was like, as you said, it was like a light bulb moment. I was like, oh my God, this is parallel exactly to everything that I am doing massively. And I was like, I was looking around New World. I was like, does anyone else know about this? And it was super motivating. I was just like, I want to start doing all of this. It completely changed the way I practiced. It completely changed the way I prepared for auditions, the way I just carried myself on stage. It just completely changed everything. And I ended up having so much more fun in the long run. I had so much more confidence and control of my own playing. It was just all around a better time. So that being said, one of the big things that Dr. Bob talks about is the pre-shot routine. You all probably see this with every other sport, but I equate audition taking or performing in general to a sport. You're at a very high level and you have to have this product. You have to be able to perform at a very high level consistently. And how do these other athletes do that? In the Olympics and all these other professional sports. And he talks about a pre-shot routine. Pitchers do this. Bowlers, they're very extreme cases. Lick your finger, tap your, all these little OCD things that people do, but they truly believe it and it does work. People get really consistent with these things. And in my opinion, it's not so much that you have to go through these things to be consistent. It's just a mental routine that you do every time to get you in the right zone to perform consistently at a high level. It's not like you're sitting there saying, oh, let me try to do this and this and this and force a pre-shot routine on yourself. For me, it was mainly taking notice of what I tend to do and just kind of refining that and streamlining it and then start doing it more and more consistently. So one thing that he talks about a lot is imagine a line between you and your instrument. This works better for us considering we have to stand the majority of the time we play. Say if I was going to play snare drum for an audition or mainly an audition, I would just pick up my sticks and just take a step back, take a deep breath, and when I'm behind that line, not in front of my instrument, is when I'm doing all of my thinking of like, okay, I'm getting the tempo in my head, the character I want. I'm kind of running through a couple tricky spots in my head. I'm getting all of these things and putting all this information in my brain. And as soon as I step forward and step into the performance zone on the other side of that line is immediately when I start that pre-shot routine. Now, it's pretty much the same with some slight variations on every instrument that I play. But, it's like, put the sticks down, count. I have to have a dedicated count off on everything I do. I cannot stress this enough. It's so easy to kind of flounder around and say, oh, I think that tempo feels a little fast. And then you kind of second guess yourself. And then you're like, oh, the committee's waiting. And then you kind of just jump into it. And then you're just immediately playing catch up. Just really taking that confidence to step up, You already have the tempo in your head. Give yourself a dedicated count off. I lift my sticks in time and I go. Another thing in my pre-shot routine that I found also helps is just to give myself a quick smile. Just smile to yourself real quick and just take notice of what you do, of where you are. You aren't in like a cubicle somewhere. You aren't, you're in an awesome space playing music, trying to play music at a very high level with a bunch of other extraordinary musicians. In the end, if you don't make it or you don't do well at that audition, it's all cumulative. You're never taking a step back. You're never getting worse. It's okay. It's okay. This is part of the process. And again, I love competing. So I loved this thrill of like going out and putting myself out there and enjoying this process of learning. If you mess up, you have to accept it. And I accept every single mistake I make because I know it's like, next time I cannot wait to try that because I won't do that again. And if I do, it's fine. You're human. We have to do this when we perform on stage all the time. Everyone makes mistakes and you have to accept it and move on and just try to get better. So the pre-shot routine for me really helped dial my mind in at the beginning because I felt that the beginnings of things really solidified the rest of the excerpt, the round, or whatever. First impressions, the first everything really, really stabilizes you. So yeah, that's my pre-shot routine for pretty much everything.
And we'll be right back. I want to give a huge thanks to the sponsor of the Honesty Pill podcast, Yamaha Corporation of America. I've been playing Yamaha equipment for decades in my own practice room, on stage with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, or touring all over the world, and Yamaha has been an absolute game changer. Something I love about Yamaha is the way they pursue excellence in all of their work and at all levels. They are as dedicated to bringing quality work for beginning students as they are for marquee artists. I admire their commitment to continuous improvement and creating a community that includes all of the musicians they serve. Make every note count, play Yamaha. Okay, let's get back to the show. The pre-shot routine, this is such excellent advice, by the way. Thank you for sharing this to the listeners. So the pre-shot routine does everything that you just said. But even if you don't believe that, or even if you haven't calibrated in what the pre-shot routine should be at its very base level, the pre-shot routine can become louder than the noise that's in your head. So listeners, try this experiment. Imagine you're on stage right now. It's dead quiet. It's the final round. It's down to you and one other person. And your hardest excerpt has been asked. Picture that excerpt right now. Close your eyes. Take a breath. What is happening inside your brain right now? What is probably happening is you're hearing, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Don't screw it up. Don't screw it up. Don't screw it up. It's like when you're golfing and you say, whatever you do, don't slice the ball into the woods. Your subconscious mind only processes slice the ball into the woods. And that's what you do. So if you're saying, don't screw up, that is not a great pre-shot routine. It's better to replace that messaging, break the spell of whatever it is your lack mindset is telling you, and focus on something productive. I love the pre-shot routine, and I love what you said about owning your mistakes and how it's not life or death. It's also worth mentioning, Matt, I've never heard anyone talk about smiling as a pre-shot routine strategy. I love that. Let's have a moment of gratitude shining right before we play this excerpt. It's fantastic.
The other thing I was going to say is it's really hard when you're taking auditions, especially in a nervous situation. Mental toughness was another huge thing for me. I don't know if you all have experienced this, but whenever I would take auditions, it's so quiet on stage. It could be so eerie. There are a ton of people on the other side of the curtain that are just being very quiet and they're listening to every sound you make. And you're about to play, again, something very challenging. You're going through this whole routine. You prep, you've done all this work to get here. And all of a sudden, in the middle of while playing an excerpt, a janitor at the top of the rafters drops something. And, that can immediately throw you. And you're like, oh, geez, and you start going down this rabbit hole. Or you hear someone on the other side of the curtain fiercely writing something. And in your mind, you start thinking, oh, about those things over there. Oh, they must hate me. They're writing a ton of things, where it's like, in reality, they could be drawing a dinosaur. They could literally be doing anything writing back there. That has nothing to do with what you should be doing or thinking about right now. So kind of taking a step back and having that mental toughness to stay in my zone, going through the pre-shot routine, committing to what I have to do and finishing it out, really going through the whole process from beginning to end and just staying in it. And having the ability to do that is extremely challenging to do perfectly. So
it's Sudoku. That's what we're doing, by the way, guys. We're all doing Sudoku back there, and the occasional dinosaur. So Matt, you mentioned earlier you come from a drum set or rock background. Can we talk about drummers for a minute? Because when you guys start beating on a desktop or the back of a notebook or the dashboard, it sounds different than when I do it. And I think it's not just about rhythm, but it's the way that you process rhythm into what I think we can call a feel. And a great drummer or percussionist has a feel that other people don't even understand. So who would you say is the greatest drummer of all time out of the following five? I got John Bonham, Led Zeppelin, Neil Peart from Rush, Buddy Rich, Dave Grohl from Nirvana, or Ringo Starr.
That is, I mean, literally you listed all of my favorite drummers except Dave Grohl. I was hoping you would say Dave Weckl.
Oh, this is an impossible list too, by the way.
I know, because literally John Bonham is the reason I started drumming. I wanted to be in like a Led Zeppelin cover group because I was actually just listening to Houses of the Holy the other day and re-loving that band. But also, yeah, I had a whole transcription of Neil Peart songs that I would just play along with, like YYZ and all these other tunes. That's really hard, man. But Buddy Rich is kind of the king. I would have to go Buddy Rich, honestly.
Okay, so why?
He's just a powerhouse. An unbelievable. Well, I think it'd be a toss-up between Neil and Buddy Rich, but only because of how much of a powerhouse they both are. Buddy Rich not only had his own band, but he was an unbelievably technically and musically amazing drummer. Was able to play solos just by himself and just sound absolutely incredible and make people, want to hear more of a drum solo. And I mean, it's the same with Neil. And the thing about, I would put Ringo up there too, only because no other drummer would sound like that in all those Beatle recordings. Like every other drummer that went in would not bring forth that sound that Ringo played. So I think he was perfect for the Beatles. But as technically, I don't think he can compare to the others. So I would say Buddy.
Very cool. Now, do you bring any of that into your playing? Of course you must, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm still looking out there. I mean, even some more gospel type drumming is now coming more into the forefront. So, even drummers for I just brought up Snarky Puppy earlier. So Larnell Lewis, absolutely just stud of a drummer. He does things that I did not know were possible. Just absolutely incredible. Blows my mind every time I see him live. As I said, Dave Weckl is another one. He's a pretty classic one. Tony Royster Jr., who's started off as like a kid, but all these. I mean, you should go if you all have time. Go on YouTube and just look up Tony Royster playing a drum solo with a metronome, and he does it first in 4/4, and then he does it in like some other mixed time signature, and he literally. Drummers' brains are, especially in this type of style, they are able to take metric modulations and make that the new beat and somehow play with that and still come back on one every single time. And so on top of that, messing with feels and all these things, different independence things between the hands, it can get wild. So I can nerd out hard about this stuff.
That's a huge Dave Weckl thing too. Yeah. I remember hearing him play with Michel Camilo in New York once, and none of these guys were using music either, which blew my mind. Like, how on earth have they memorized this stuff? When I was a music education major, I took percussion techniques class. I learned how to hold the sticks, how to do a roll, playing for the wrist, a whole bunch of rudiments. What would you say the number one thing you would tell a beginning percussionist to pay attention to? Your how you hold the stick is your embouchure. So walk around the house and just get really comfortable holding a stick or a mallet or whatever, and it just takes like a week or two. But that can go with everything: 4-mallet grip, timpani mallets, snare drum sticks. Just getting really comfortable with holding something. But I cannot stress this enough. When you are just starting, do not jump into crazy amounts of practice. This is just like working out.
injury prevention is huge. You have to start really slow, take a lot of breaks, and it's okay. It's okay to just go like 5 or 10 minutes and take a break at a time, especially even I have to do this if I'm coming back and I haven't played in a while. I cannot jump in immediately with large practice sessions. Tension-free playing is crucial. Making sure that your shoulders aren't hiked up, you aren't overstressing the small muscles in your hand, because the one thing I see with a lot of older players is injury from a lot of tension over the years, technique that overstresses small muscles really, over the years. I mean, it can kill your later career. So really, really stress tension-free playing. Now, that's way different than adding pressure to things, but definitely just making sure you're really, really loose and relaxed. It should feel very easy.
Great advice. So we like to educate here on the Honesty Pill podcast. For everybody listening in a car right now, we like to drum on the steering wheel, right? Can you teach us a quick rudiment? How about a paradiddle? And the reason why I'm asking is when I first learned what a paradiddle was, again, it was like, oh, there's a lot more going on back there than just banging out 16th notes. What is a paradiddle? Why is a paradiddle, and how do we do it?
Well, I don't know. For some reason, we have a knack with naming these things that sound like it, and it's pretty good. So, I mean, if you could, a diddle is normally two of the same hand. So, paradiddle would be right, left, right, or left, right, left, left. One of the best rudiments to learn right there. You can use that literally on everything. So if you're in your car, you can just go right, left, right, left, left.
Can you bang that out on the mic? What does it sound? What does that sound like?
So I can try to do two hands there.
Even the dog liked it. So, but then you're getting that into a really fast pattern, and it creates a flow and an efficiency too, right?
But on top of that, you can start adding. So if that was in 4/4, da. So right, left, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. You can start with an accent on one. Right, left, left. And then you start displacing that accent. So now it's on the second. Right, left, left, right, left, right. And then you start going down the line. But then I guess the next level after that is you do this in a triplet fashion. So it would not line up, but it will eventually, if that makes sense.
I never graduated to the triplet part. I did learn a double paradiddle, which I'm pretty proud of.
That also is what is so satisfying to play.
I love the naming conventions you have too. So here you go. Tap.
Yep. So it's actually a low stroke. Yep.
It sounds like a tap. Or how about flam tap?
Flam tap. Yep. You got to have it.
Flam tap. It sounds exactly like what it is. All right, let's clear this up right now because I'm really curious about this. Swoop taper on drumsticks, nice full weighty sound throughout the entire dynamic range. I know I've always found that the laminated birch is the secret to reducing the overall size of the stick while maintaining the same density, but does it really provide that perfect and elusive bounce?
Wow, you are really good at selling my stick there.
Obviously, I have no idea what I just said. I just read that off your website. But I do know that you have your own Vic Firth signature sticks. Your name is printed right there on the side of it. How does it feel for a kid from LA who won his dream job to have one of the world's most recognized brands of drumsticks with your name on it?
Yeah, it was a dream come true. I mean, they approached me about this and I kind of just lost my mind for a little bit. And then they proceeded to send me hundreds and hundreds of pairs of sticks to try. So,
while we're on this topic, let's talk about equipment for 1 second. I did a little research at the Walt Disney Concert Hall, and I found out that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we have in the Walt Disney Concert Hall the largest percussion room possibly of any other in the country. Can you give me a guess of how many sticks, bells, cymbals you guys have back there? Not even beginning to talk about all the toys. Rumor has it you even have your own set of garbage can lids.
These rumors are true. We have a different a variety of garbage can lids. But I don't know. For cymbals, we probably have, I would say, close to 60 different cymbals, maybe more. I mean, I'm talking like even pairs or different cymbals, like all ranging from like little tiny little cymbals to special effects cymbals to piatti to drum set cymbals to chinas to, all of these different sounds. I mean, our room is absolutely enormous. And, Raynor, the person I replaced, that was the previous principal, really did an amazing job setting up this room. At some point, I'll take a little video or a little photo of everything. But we have tons of snare drums. I think this room is the biggest in the country. I don't know about in the world, but this room is, I don't know. Every time another percussionist from another orchestra comes and plays with us, they're just always like, this is your room. You aren't just like crammed in a little area backstage.
You've found percussion mecca. So there's a serious question here that we can sort of just touch on real briefly is, if all this equipment lives in this room and there's so much nuance and technique, percussionists have to play so many different types of techniques. How do you practice?
Well, that's a great question. My technique and my sound concepts are universal with every percussion instrument. So the way I play snare drum is the same way I basically play cymbals, xylophone, triangle, tambourine. It's all basically the same thing with some slight variations. So I basically do everything off of one thing, which is a snare drum. That is the thing I practice the most. And that's the thing that I feel like I can like spread out the easiest. So for me at least, but I definitely take time to just like pull some random things off of the shelves that I normally never practice, that I decide to just hit a little bit, like coming into the holiday season, just taking a couple minutes to practice your sleigh bells.
Great tip. And also not an excuse, beginning drummers. If you don't have access to all this equipment, you can get everything you need from the snare drum that you can ask for Christmas coming up.
Absolutely.
I've got some rapid fire questions. I know these questions answers could be huge, but I want to hit these before I let you go. What is a jingling Johnny, and why is that? Am I saying that wrong? What do you call that thing?
It's a jingling Johnny or a Turkish crescent, and this is, if again, I'll post this on a picture or something from our room, but it is something that people used to march with. And it's this huge, it's hard to describe. It's a pole that's about maybe like 7 feet tall. It has these crazy shapes to it and jingles or bells hanging off it that you would just bang into the ground, that you would march with.
It was Berlioz uses this instrument, right?
Yeah, and I think we also used it for some Mozart piece as well.
All right, I'll have to get a picture of you and post it on the show notes. Okay, top tip on how to use a metronome.
Start off really simple. Just being able to find out what it sounds like to bury the click is super, super huge. Being able to not only do that, but play on different variations of the front and back on command, and then take away the click and still do the same.
Bury the click. I love that. It's great advice. Best piece of advice you can give a beginner about practice.
Oh my God, I was just about, okay, so music is a language. You have to be able to speak this language and communicate this with others. So not only practicing by yourself, but practice with other people. Practice, playing these things with someone else is super, super, super helpful and will help down the road, especially for percussionists. We really need to make sure that we play well with other people. So I would say, do a lot of fundamental work, but also be sure to play with other people a lot.
Matt, I want to take a quick flashback to one of the first times you and I played chamber music together back in 2016.
I know exactly what you're going to...
The LA Phil Brass Quintet was asked to put together a short video piece. It was going to be shot with this new 3D image virtual reality camera, and it was actually sponsored by the J. Crew clothing company. And we all got these free, snappy, expensive cashmere sweaters and pants to wear for the video. And we're going to record Leroy Anderson's Sleigh Ride. Then at the last minute, our management decided to add percussion to the project. So they called our brand new untenured principal percussionist. And when you walked out onto the stage for the shoot, they had some very special clothes set aside for you. Do you happen to remember what they picked out for you?
It had to do with some red suit and maybe some type of beard and hat. If I remember correctly, something like that.
Yeah, as I recall, you looked a hell of a lot like Santa Claus.
So during that year, Chris Azukian, our I forget what position he was in.
VP of sleigh bells, I think. Yeah.
That's right. So he came up to me after a rehearsal and said, Gustavo wants to play sleigh bells and whip for that recording for the brass ensemble. So I had to go and help coach him and bring the instruments. So I brought them, and 5 minutes before we play, or before he's supposed to play, there's no Gustavo, but there's a Santa Claus outfit in the room and Chris Azukian with a cell phone.
So they pulled a little bait and switch.
That they did.
The reason I brought it up was two reasons. One, the fact that you were such an amazing sport to wear a Santa Claus suit in the video, which, by the way, I'm going to link to in the show notes. And we may even, LA Phil was kind enough to give me permission to use an audio clip. So it's going to be our outro for this episode. But also the five of us in the group we were on your team. We're like, this guy's a team player. This is how he's going to be to work with. And I just want to give you some appreciation. You have been an incredible colleague, always coming over to collaborate, ask questions. The energy you bring to the stage is something that is rare. And I think what makes the orchestra worth working in is working with players like you, even if you would be asked to wear a Santa Claus suit on YouTube. So I want to say thank you on behalf of everyone who got to enjoy that. And you're an amazing sport.
Well, thank you, Chris. So worth it.
How have your feelings changed about your job since you first got it?
They haven't. I'm still enjoying every single second of this.
That is a great place to wrap up. And I hope that contagious optimism is reaching you through the speakers wherever you're listening right now. Matt, so great to have you on the show. And thank you for sharing your insights. You are an inspiration to musicians everywhere and breaking some of these myths about expectations of age or experience or your background. I think you're a walking billboard of it just doesn't matter if you're willing to roll your sleeves up, do the work, and embrace the joy in what you're doing. And I'll see you on stage in a few hours so we can do a little bit more of that joy together.
Yeah, sounds great, Chris. Thanks again for having me.
All right. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye. All right, there it is. Big thanks to Matt Howard, principal percussion of the Los Angeles Philharmonic and one of the best Santa Clauses you could ever hope to work with. Also, a quick thanks to the Los Angeles Philharmonic and everyone over at Woodbury Music Company for giving us permission to use this clip of Sleigh Ride, written by Leroy Anderson, arranged by David Kaiser, and performed by the Los Angeles Philharmonic Brass and Percussion Ensemble. I hope you're enjoying it. And I want to wish you and your family a safe and restful holiday. God only knows we could totally use that after the past year or two. I've got one more episode coming to you next week with composer Joseph Soa that you do not want to miss. And then I'll catch up with all of you in 2022. Okay, I'm out of here. Thanks for listening. See you next time.